The knock came at 12:47 a.m., and Sophia Rivers had no framework for understanding what was about to happen. She was in bare feet, gray sweatpants, and an old Northwestern hoodie, the kind of vulnerable state you never expect a visitor to witness, especially not at this hour, especially not on a Saturday morning that was meant to be hers alone. She'd been lying in bed, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, her mind still tangled in the aftermath of the night before, when the sound came again. Not aggressive, measured, as though whoever was on the other side of that door knew exactly how late it was and was giving her warning. Sophia padded to the door, her heart already moving faster than her mind could justify. It was Chicago, 2026, and while the building had a front desk, the kind of person who made it past security without announcing themselves was either emergency services or someone she knew. She looked through the peephole and saw nothing but the hallway, empty, fluorescent lit, waiting. For some reason, she opened it anyway. The woman standing there wasn't who Sophia expected. Of course, Sophia didn't know who to expect, but Madison Hartley was certainly not it. Madison Hartley, who existed in the architecture of Sterling and Cross like a portrait on a wall, present but untouchable, observed but never truly seen. Madison Hartley, at 42 years old, looking nothing like she looked in the office. No tailored suit, no armor of professionalism. She wore a black turtleneck and jeans, and her dark hair fell loose past her shoulders, and there was something in her face that Sophia had never seen directed at anyone in the workplace. Urgency. "Hi," Madison said. Just one word. Her voice was different too. Lower, less polished. Sophia stared. She didn't speak. Her brain was running through catastrophic scenarios. The photo. It was about the photo. Tyler had posted it somewhere, and it had gotten back to... "Can I come in?" Madison asked. Sophia stepped aside without thinking. She'd been conditioned since childhood to obey implicit authority, but this was something else. This was something her body recognized before her mind caught up. Madison closed the door behind her, and the small apartment, never intimate before, always a quiet refuge, suddenly became a space with a different kind of meaning. There were 2 glasses on the coffee table with traces of last night's wine, a cardigan thrown over the back of the couch, the normal debris of a person's solitary life, usually invisible, now apparent. "I probably shouldn't be here," Madison said, and it sounded like the only true thing she'd said all night. Sophia still hadn't found words. Madison walked deeper into the apartment, moving past the living room toward the window that overlooked Michigan Avenue. The city lights were still on, even at this hour, the constant glow of Chicago never entirely sleeping. Madison looked out at it like she was seeing it for the first time, or perhaps like she was looking at it the way she looked at most things, from a distance she had learned to maintain. "Why are you here?" Sophia asked. The words came out small. Madison turned back to her, and in that moment, something shifted in her expression. A door opening that had been locked for a very long time. "Because I saw a photo of you," Madison said slowly, "and I realized I've been looking for a reason to talk to you for 18 months. And finally, I had one. That was the beginning. Not of this night, but of everything that came after." To understand how a CEO showed up at a junior analyst's door at midnight, you have to understand the preceding 48 hours. You have to understand who Sophia was before this moment, and more importantly, who Madison had become while watching her. Sophia Rivers had been at Sterling and Cross for 18 months. She was 26 years old, with a degree from Northwestern in economics, and a hunger that sometimes frightened her with its intensity. She wanted to make partner by 35. She wanted a corner office. She wanted people to say her name with respect. But more than that, and this was the thing she rarely admitted, she wanted to belong. She wanted to be inside the architecture of power, not observing it from the outside. The company itself was a machine designed to separate the ambitious from the ordinary. Sterling and Cross occupied the 53rd through 56th floors of a building in downtown Chicago. The walls were glass and steel, the aesthetic deliberately cold, deliberately masculine, the kind of place where every decision was watched, every conversation was a negotiation, and every moment of vulnerability was a liability. Sophia had learned this quickly and well. She had become excellent at seeming confident, even when she wasn't. Excellent at appearing unfazed by the casual brutality of the competitive environment. Excellent at pretending that working until 11 p.m. was not a personal sacrifice, but simply what it meant to be serious. Madison Hartley had run Sterling and Cross for 11 years. She had come to the company as a rising executive at 31 and had moved through its hierarchy like someone who understood the mechanics of power so thoroughly that she could manipulate them without effort. She was known for three things: her strategic brilliance, her ruthlessness in eliminating inefficiency, and her absolute refusal to form personal relationships with anyone below her station. There were stories about Madison in the office, the woman who'd fired an entire department via email on Christmas Eve. The CEO who'd turned down a partnership opportunity worth $40 million because the other party had made an awkward joke about women in finance. The kind of person who maintained her power through distance, through an almost monastic dedication to separation. What nobody knew, and what only Madison herself fully understood, was that this separation wasn't natural. It was constructed. She had married at 28, a man named Richard Hartley, older by 15 years, successful, and already respected in the industry. It had seemed like the natural trajectory. Ambitious woman, ambitious man, the kind of partnership that looks good from the outside and functions like a business merger from the inside. Richard had wanted an elegant wife who would be an asset to his career. Madison had wanted to prove that she could be more than someone's complement. For 10 years, they had coexisted in a state of profound mutual irrelevance. Then Richard had a heart attack at 43, and Madison became a widow. She was 38 years old when she attended his funeral and realized that the only thing she felt was relief. Not sadness, not grief. Relief that she would no longer have to perform the role of devoted wife. Relief that she could finally be alone. But alone was not the same as free. Alone was what happened when you had built your entire identity around work, around productivity, around the absence of feeling. Alone was what happened when you forgot, or had never learned, how to let anyone see you. For 4 years after Richard's death, Madison threw herself into Sterling and Cross with a kind of desperate energy. She made the company more profitable than it had ever been. She implemented new strategies, eliminated inefficiency, and became a fixture at industry events. She dressed impeccably. She spoke with precision. She was, by any external measure, thriving. But there was a hollowness to it, a sense that she was executing a performance without understanding why she was performing anymore. Then Sophia arrived. It wasn't sudden. It was gradual, the way certain people slowly come into focus. Madison started noticing her in meetings. The way Sophia took notes, careful and thorough. The way she asked intelligent questions, but always with a slight hesitation, as though she wasn't quite sure she had the right to ask them. The way she dressed carefully, in clothes that were professional but not quite expensive enough, the uniform of someone still learning what it meant to belong. And then, over the months, Madison noticed something else. There was something in Sophia's face, in the way she approached her work, that reminded Madison of herself, not as she was now, but as she had been, before marriage, before power, before she had learned to turn off the parts of herself that were too vulnerable to survive in a competitive environment. Madison didn't know what to do with this observation. She maintained distance. She was professional. She made sure never to acknowledge Sophia in any way that would differentiate her from the other junior analysts. But she noticed. She watched. And very slowly, a small crack began to form in the wall that Madison had spent 15 years building. This is the thing nobody tells you about power. It is extraordinarily lonely. It is possible to have everything, the title, the salary, the respect, the control, and still wake up in the morning feeling like you are drowning. Friday night came. The company was hosting a gala at the Ritz-Carlton, celebrating a client's 40th birthday. It was the kind of event that stretched across multiple rooms, with open bars and catering that cost more than most people's monthly rent. It was a performance, like most corporate events, a space designed to demonstrate power and success and the kinds of connections that money could buy. Sophia had been invited, which meant she was considered junior enough to attend, but not impressive enough to require direct interaction. She had worn a black dress, tasteful and conservative, and had positioned herself in the corner of the main ballroom where she could observe without being too visible. This was the strategy she had learned. Show up, be present, but don't draw attention. Madison attended the same event. She wore a navy dress cut in a way that was elegant but not ostentatious, diamond earrings that had belonged to her mother, and an expression of controlled attention. She moved through the rooms with the kind of efficiency that came from doing this hundreds of times. She shook hands, she accepted compliments, she performed gratitude. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she saw Sophia. It was Tyler Chen who actually set everything in motion. Tyler was a senior analyst, well-liked, the kind of person who had mastered the art of seeming genuine in an environment that rewarded performance. He had had too much to drink by 10 p.m., not drunk but loosened enough to be dangerous, and he had noticed Sophia standing by herself near one of the high windows that looked out over Lake Michigan. He had approached her, and they had started talking, not about work, about something else. About how weird it all was, the corporate thing, the way everyone was trying so hard to seem like something they weren't. And at some point, Sophia had laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded, the kind of laugh that emerges when someone has temporarily forgotten to perform. Her whole face had changed. She looked, for just a moment, like someone who was actually alive. Tyler had his phone in his hand. He took a photo. It was the kind of photo that captured something true, not a posed smile, but genuine joy, genuine presence. He had meant it innocently. He was just documenting a moment. Then he had posted it. The photo went to a private network, a group chat of people from various companies who had a specific kind of social arrangement. It was a space that was slightly removed from the professional world, but not entirely. It was the kind of space where people could be themselves, but not too much themselves. The photo of Sophia spread across this network, a junior analyst at Sterling & Cross, caught in a moment of genuine emotion, laughing like she was free. Madison saw it at 11:37 p.m., sitting alone in her apartment in the Chicago high-rise where she maintained residence. She was still in the navy dress. She had kicked off her heels but hadn't changed, couldn't seem to find the energy to move from the couch that faced the window. She looked at the photo for a long time. Sophia's face was transformed by joy. It was a face that Madison recognized because it was the face she used to make, decades ago, before she had learned that vulnerability was a liability. It was the face of someone who had temporarily forgotten to be afraid. Madison stared at the image for so long that the screen began to blur, and then, in a moment that she would later understand as the culmination of 4 years of slow erosion, she did something that violated every protocol she had established for herself. She called her driver. She told him to take her to the South Loop. She gave him an address that she had never visited but had somehow memorized from Sophia's emergency contact form. It took her 45 minutes to arrive, 45 minutes during which she could have changed her mind, could have called the car back, could have returned to the safety of her carefully constructed distance. She didn't. She took the elevator to the 22nd floor. She walked down a hallway lit by recessed lights. She stood outside apartment 2204 and raised her hand to knock, and in that moment, Madison understood that she was about to cross a line that, as CEO, she could never uncross. She knocked anyway. When Sophia opened the door, Madison experienced something like vertigo. The girl in the photo, and this is what she was still learning to call Sophia in her mind, this girl, this person young enough to be her child, young enough to have her whole life still unlived in front of her, looked even more real in person than she had in the photograph. She looked frightened and confused and desperately unprepared for whatever was about to happen. "Hi," Madison said, and then sat in Sophia's living room for the next 3 hours, while everything she had built began to crumble. "Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. If this story is getting to you, If you're already feeling what these two women felt, hit like and subscribe to this channel. There are stories like this one that deserve to be told, that deserve to be heard by people who understand what it means to love impossibly. Come with me deeper into what happened in that apartment, into the 3 hours that changed everything. They sat on the couch at first. Sophia had offered tea, and Madison had accepted, and when Sophia came back from the kitchen with 2 cups, they had positioned themselves at opposite ends of the furniture, like people trying to maintain a perimeter of safety. "I'm sorry for coming here," Madison said. This seemed important to her, establishing the fact that what was happening was her choice, not circumstance. "I'm sorry for the hour. I'm sorry for all of it." "Why did you come?" Sophia asked again. She was holding the tea but not drinking it, watching the steam rise. Madison looked toward the window. "Because I've been looking at you for 18 months, she said slowly, "and I realized tonight, looking at that photo, that I don't know you at all. That I've been building a version of you in my mind that probably has nothing to do with who you actually are. And I realized that I needed to know, I needed to understand what I was missing." Sophia didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was small. "You don't need to do that," she said. "As CEO, I mean. You don't need to know anything about anyone below you." "I know," Madison said. "That's why I'm here at midnight and not tomorrow at the office." What happened next was the kind of conversation that changes people. It didn't have the structure of normal dialogue. It was more like a confession, or perhaps a duet where both parties were slowly learning the melody. Madison spoke first, and what she said was this: that she had been married for 10 years to a man she had never loved, that she had used work to fill the space where a real life should have been, that she had become so skilled at maintaining distance that she had forgotten why she was maintaining it, that Richard's death had been, if she was being honest, a relief, and that in the 4 years since, she had felt nothing but a kind of mechanical precision in everything she did, including running a corporation of 500 people. "I realized," Madison said, "that I had mistaken control for freedom, that I had spent so much energy building a wall between myself and everyone else, that I had built a wall between myself and myself. Do you understand that?" Sophia did understand. She understood it because she recognized it. She was doing the same thing, trying to build the same walls, trying to learn the same lessons that Madison had learned. And something in her rebelled against that trajectory. "I don't want to be like that," Sophia said quietly. "Neither do I," Madison replied. "But the problem is, I already am. I already became exactly that. And I don't know if there's a way back from it." The conversation deepened. They talked about the photo, what it meant that Tyler had captured her laughing, what it meant that Madison had seen it and needed to act on it. They talked about ambition and what it cost. They talked about the way the corporate world operated, the way it demanded a kind of self-erasure in exchange for power and money. They talked about love, which was not something Madison had brought up, but which emerged inevitably from the other conversations. The way love emerges when two people are being honest with each other for the first time. By 1:30 a.m., they had moved closer together on the couch. By 2:15 a.m., Madison was talking about her marriage, about the nights she had spent lying awake next to Richard, feeling nothing, about the way she had trained herself to achieve emotional absence, the way athletes train themselves to achieve physical performance, about the fact that she had successfully removed the capacity for love from herself, and now, at 42 years old, she wasn't sure if it was possible to put it back. Sophia listened. She listened with the kind of attention that Madison hadn't received in decades. And at some point during that listening, something shifted between them. Madison was sitting on Sophia's left. She was crying, which she had not intended to do, which she had trained herself never to do. Her face was wet, and her composure was completely fractured, and she looked at Sophia with an expression of such vulnerable need that Sophia understood, in that moment, that this was not a CEO and a junior analyst anymore. This was two people who had been separated from themselves, and who were, in this brief window, reaching toward each other. "I don't know what I'm doing," Madison said. "Neither do I," Sophia replied. This is inappropriate, Madison said. Yes, Sophia agreed. This could destroy both of us, Madison said. I know, Sophia said. And then Madison kissed her. It was soft and careful at first, the kind of kiss that asks permission. And then it became something else, something more urgent, more necessary. It was the kind of kiss that emerges when two people have been denying themselves for so long that the denial can no longer be sustained. They kissed like they were learning how to be alive. They kissed like they had been half asleep and were finally waking up. They kissed until Sophia's tea was completely cold, and the city lights outside the window had begun their gradual dimming toward dawn. And then, abruptly, Madison pulled away. This is a mistake, she said. Her voice had changed again, had regained some of its hardness. This is a terrible mistake, and I shouldn't have come here, and you shouldn't have let me in, and we need to forget this happened. Sophia looked at her, confused. What? I'm your boss, Madison said, standing up from the couch. I can ruin you. I can destroy you. That's what I do, and I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have let myself. She stopped. She was putting the wall back, rebuilding the distance. Sophia could see it happening, could see the vulnerability retreating back behind the armor. Madison, Sophia began. Don't, Madison said. Don't talk to me right now. Don't say my name like that. Don't do anything that makes this harder than it already is. She left quickly, almost desperately, the way someone leaves when they realize they are about to lose control completely. She left Sophia sitting on the couch in her gray sweatpants and her old Northwestern hoodie, confused and wanting and suddenly very alone. The Monday morning after that weekend, Sophia arrived at Sterling and Cross to find the company in chaos. Madison had resigned. A formal announcement had come through early that morning. Effective immediately, she was stepping down from her position as CEO. No reason was given. An interim management structure was being put in place. Everyone was to carry on with their duties. The office erupted into speculation. Madison Hartley never quit anything. Madison Hartley had never shown a moment of hesitation in her career. Madison Hartley was steel and ambition made flesh. And yet she was gone. Sophia tried to find her. She called the main office number and asked if she could reach Madison. She was told that Madison was no longer taking calls. She sent an email. It went unanswered. She waited outside the building one evening, hoping to see her, to understand what had happened. Nothing. Days turned into weeks. The narrative about Madison's resignation shifted. Some people said she was taking time for personal reasons. Others speculated about health issues or a family crisis. No one knew the truth, because Madison wasn't telling anyone. What happened next was something Sophia had not anticipated. In the power vacuum left by Madison's departure, Sophia found herself suddenly elevated. She was pulled into meetings with the interim leadership. They asked her opinions. They valued her input. 6 weeks after Madison resigned, Sophia was offered a promotion to senior analyst, a leap that normally took 3 to 4 years. She turned it down. She requested a meeting with the interim CEO and explained that while she appreciated the opportunity, she couldn't accept it. She didn't give a reason. The interim CEO looked confused, tried to convince her, and eventually accepted her refusal. Sophia submitted her resignation 2 weeks later, citing personal reasons. What she didn't tell anyone was that she had found a way to contact Madison. It took 3 weeks and a private investigator and more money than she should have spent, but she found an email address. She sent one message: I'm not staying. I'm not going to move up because you're gone. That's not fair to you, and it's not what I want. 3 days later, Madison replied with an address for a hotel in Milwaukee and a time. Nothing else. They met at 3 p.m. on a Thursday in a room on the 14th floor of a boutique hotel in downtown Milwaukee. They met in secret. They started meeting regularly. Milwaukee, Madison, a small town in Michigan where no one knew them. They met in spaces that existed outside of their real lives, in moments carved out of the carefully structured existence they both maintained publicly. 2 months. They had 2 months of this. 2 months of meeting in hotel rooms and talking and touching and learning what it meant to be alive with another person. 2 months before the rumor started circulating through Sterling and Cross that Sophia had been promoted suspiciously quickly, had then resigned suspiciously quickly, and that the former CEO had coincidentally resigned on the same timeline. 2 months before people started asking questions. 2 months before it became dangerous. Madison broke it off. She had to. She had her reputation. And Sophia had her entire career ahead of her. It wasn't sustainable. It was never going to be sustainable. The age difference, the power dynamic, the fact that they had met in a context that violated every corporate protocol and probably several laws, it was all a beautiful, impossible thing that couldn't exist in daylight. "I'm sorry," Madison said during one of their last meetings. They were lying in bed in a hotel room in Saginaw, and the light was coming through the windows in a way that made everything look like it was happening in a dream. "I'm sorry for all of this. I'm sorry for showing up at your door. I'm sorry for making you think that something was possible when it never was." "It's not your fault," Sophia said. She had learned this phrase over the 2 months, learned to say it even when she didn't quite believe it. "Yes, it is," Madison said. "I was your CEO. I had power over you. I violated that trust, and I compromised your career, and I did it because I was selfish. Because I wanted something and I took it, and I didn't think about what the consequences would be for you." Sophia rolled over to face her. "Do you regret it?" Madison looked at her for a long time. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I regret that I had to do it this way. I regret that the only way I could have you was in secret, but I don't regret knowing you. I don't regret these 2 months. I don't regret loving you." It was the first time either of them had said the word love out loud. After that, the separation was inevitable. Madison told Sophia that she was taking a consulting position with a firm in New York. Sophia found a new job with a different company, a lateral move that wouldn't look like she was running away. They didn't see each other again. But Sophia kept the email address. She kept the memory of the hotel rooms and the vulnerability and the absolute clarity of knowing what she wanted, even if wanting it was impossible. If you've made it this far into the story, you're already feeling what Sophia felt during those years that followed. You know what it means to carry something beautiful and broken inside you, to love someone you can't have, to wonder if you made the right choice. Share this story with someone who needs it. Send it to the person who has loved impossibly. The ending is coming, and it's going to stay with you longer than you expect. 5 years passed. Sophia climbed the ladder. She was excellent at her new job, and they promoted her quickly. She became a senior analyst, then a manager, then a director. She built a career on the foundation of someone who had learned ambition early and never forgotten it. She dated occasionally, but nothing stuck. Nothing had the intensity of those 2 months with Madison. She had learned something in those hotel rooms that no one else seemed to understand. She thought about Madison. She thought about her often, especially on certain kinds of days, cold days in winter, days when the light came through the windows a specific way, days when Sophia accomplished something significant and wanted to call Madison to tell her. She didn't call, she didn't reach out, she maintained distance, the way Madison had taught her to maintain distance. And then, on a Thursday in April, 5 years and 2 months after Madison had showed up at her door, an email arrived. The subject line was blank. The sender was an address she didn't recognize. The body contained 2 words: "I chose differently." Sophia sat at her desk for 10 minutes and didn't move. She read those 4 words over and over again. I chose differently. It took her about 30 seconds to understand what Madison meant. In those 2 months together, they had talked about choices, about the pathways not taken, about the possibility of a different future, if they were brave enough or reckless enough to reach for it. I chose differently meant I made a choice. I left the city. I left the consulting job. I left the structure that kept us apart. She replied within 5 minutes, "Tell me where." The response came back with a time and a location. A coffee shop in northern Michigan. This Saturday at 2 p.m., Sophia took the day off work. She drove north through the state, through the landscape that was just beginning to show the first signs of spring. The trees were budding, the world was waking up. It felt, in retrospect, like exactly the right season for this. The coffee shop was small and quiet, the kind of place that existed off the main highways, where tourists didn't go. Madison was already there when Sophia arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She looked older than Sophia had remembered, older and somehow younger at the same time. She had let her hair grow out, and she was wearing clothes that weren't expensive, clothes that looked like they came from regular stores. She looked human, in a way that Sophia had never seen before. They didn't stand up, they didn't hug. They just looked at each other for a long moment, and then Sophia sat down across from her. "Hi," Madison said. Just one word, the same word she had used 5 years ago, when she showed up at Sophia's door. "Hi," Sophia replied. "I quit," Madison said. "I quit the consulting job. I sold my apartment in New York. I've been working part-time as a consultant for local nonprofits in Michigan. I'm planning to go back to school. I'm thinking about getting a degree in social work. I'm learning to live on less money and do work that actually matters to me." "Okay," Sophia said. She wasn't sure what to say to all of this. "I've been thinking about those 2 months," Madison continued. "For 5 years. I've been thinking about what I said, that it was a mistake, that it was something we had to let go of. I've been thinking about how I framed it as something noble, us sacrificing for each other, us choosing the responsible thing. And I realized, a few months ago, that I was lying. I was lying to you and to myself. It wasn't noble. It was just fear. I was afraid of what would happen if I chose you over everything else. So I chose the everything else, and I told you it was what had to happen." She paused and looked directly at Sophia. "But 5 years ago," Madison continued, "you already chose me. You turned down that promotion. You resigned from the company. You made a choice, and I didn't follow. I made you sacrifice alone, and I've been trying to live with that for 5 years, and I can't. I can't live with it anymore." Sophia felt tears running down her face. She wasn't aware of when she had started crying. "I don't know what you're asking," Sophia said. "I don't know what you want from me." "I want to know if it's too late," Madison said. "I want to know if you've moved on, if you're with someone, if you've built a life that doesn't have space for me. Because if you have, I'll understand, and I'll leave, and I'll wish you well. But I need to know if there's any possibility that we could do this differently this time. Not in secret, not in hotel rooms, but openly, together." Sophia reached across the table and took Madison's hand. She didn't speak. She couldn't find words. Her body was responding, the same response she'd had 5 years ago, the same urgency and need and clarity that had always characterized what she felt for this woman. "I've been waiting for you to say that," Sophia said finally, "for 5 years. I didn't know if you would. I didn't know if you were capable of choosing something other than safety." "I wasn't," Madison said. "For a long time I wasn't capable of it. But I learned, or I'm learning." They stayed in that coffee shop for 4 hours. They talked about what 5 years had taught them. They talked about the futility of waiting and the danger of believing that the right time would come if you were just patient enough. They talked about how love doesn't work like corporate strategy. You don't get it right by waiting for perfect conditions. You get it right by being willing to be reckless. When they left the coffee shop, the sun was starting to set. Madison had a car parked nearby. She asked Sophia if she wanted to see where she was living. Sophia said yes. The house was small, a cottage on a lake in northern Michigan. It wasn't expensive or impressive. It was just a place. But Sophia could see the pieces of Madison in it. Books on shelves, photographs on walls, evidence of a life being lived rather than performed. They made love for the first time in 5 years. It was different than before. It was slower, more certain, the kind of intimacy that comes from knowing someone through time rather than in a frantic 2-month window. It was better, and it was harder, because everything they had felt before was still there, and now it was complicated by the fact that they had lived without each other. Afterward, lying in bed, Madison asked Sophia if she would stay. Not just that night, but longer. A week, a month. See what happened. Sophia said yes. She called her company on Monday and told them she needed a month of personal leave. She told them she didn't know when she'd be coming back. They tried to convince her to stay, to reconsider, to at least give them a timeline. She told them she would call when she knew. She didn't go back for a month. She went back for 3 weeks after a month. Then she asked for an extended leave of absence. Then she resigned. She found work locally, consulting work mostly, the kind of work that had flexibility and didn't require her to prove herself to anyone anymore. She and Madison rented a house together on the lake. They built a life that looked, from the outside, like the lives of many other women in rural Michigan. 2 people who had chosen something different, something simpler, something truer. But what had been lost couldn't be recovered. Those 5 years of separation had taken a toll that no amount of togetherness could completely repair. They had missed experiences. They had built separate identities. There was a part of Sophia that had learned to live without Madison, and that part didn't entirely disappear. There was a part of Madison that had learned to believe that she was incapable of choosing love, and that part still whispered to her some nights. But they had something now that they didn't have before. They had the knowledge that they had chosen each other in full daylight, without the pressure of secrecy or the framework of corporate hierarchy. They had chosen each other knowing exactly what they were giving up, the power, the status, the kind of respect that only comes from traditional success. And they had chosen each other anyway. The night that they had been together for exactly 1 year after reuniting in Michigan, they sat on the porch of the house and watched the sun set over the lake. Madison put her arm around Sophia, and Sophia leaned into her, and neither of them needed to speak. They had lived long enough to know that this moment, this presence, this choice to keep choosing, was the most redemptive thing either of them would ever experience. Sophia thought back to the moment 5 years before that, when Madison had shown up at her door at midnight. She thought about opening the door and not knowing who it was. She thought about the fear and the confusion and the way her whole world had changed in a single night. She thought about the 2 months that followed, stolen and secret, and more alive than any other period of her life. She thought about the 5-year separation, which had felt like a kind of death, a kind of necessary amputation. And then she thought about this, about sitting on a porch in Michigan with the woman she loved, in a life they had built together, in a relationship that had cost them almost everything, but had given them something that most people never found. This is the thing about love, about the kind of love that breaks the rules and defies convention and costs you everything. It marks you. It leaves scars. Sophia and Madison would carry the scars of those 5 years forever. They would carry the knowledge of what they had sacrificed. But they would also carry something else, the knowledge that they had been brave enough to come back to each other, to choose again, to believe that it wasn't too late. The photo that Tyler had taken at the client's gala, the photo of Sophia laughing, uninhibited and alive, had sparked everything. But it wasn't the photo that mattered in the end. It was what came after the photo. It was Madison's choice to act on something she saw. It was Sophia's choice to open the door. It was their mutual choice to let themselves be seen by each other, truly and completely. And it was their choice, 5 years later, to believe that love didn't have to be perfect, or easy, or convenient. That sometimes the most redemptive thing you could do was to choose the difficult path, the uncertain path, the path that required you to sacrifice everything you thought you wanted in order to have what you actually needed. Madison and Sophia never got back the years they lost. They never got back the career opportunities Sophia sacrificed or the leadership legacy Madison walked away from, but they got something else. They got a life that was real. They got each other. And in the end, that was the only redemption that mattered. The question that lingers, the question I want to leave you with, is this. What are you willing to lose in order to have what you actually want? And how long are you willing to wait before you choose yourself? That like you're about to give, that's your way of saying, I saw this story. I felt the weight of it. I understand what it means to love someone when the world says you shouldn't. I understand what it means to sacrifice. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to someone who has loved impossibly, who has had to let go, who is waiting to be chosen again. And subscribe to the channel, because there are so many stories like this one still waiting to be told. There are so many lives out there, so many people navigating the impossible terrain between duty and desire, between safety and truth. These stories matter. They deserve to be heard, and we're going to keep telling them.